Welcome back to another episode of Buckeye Revival presented by the Walk Foundation. We first would like to thank our sponsors, Rock City Church and the Firm Foundation Group. They truly make this podcast possible, so we really thank you for your support. But today we are so pleased to be joined by former Ohio State linebacker, a man that has a lot of credibility here in the city of Columbus, Ohio. I'm super excited to be joined by Bobby Carpenter. Welcome to the show, Bobby.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate having me on.
Yeah, so Bobby, you're an Ohio guy. You grew up in this state. What was it like growing up in Lancaster?
It's small town America. It was pretty great. I'm one of four of three younger brothers. We grew up on a farm. My parents were just joking. It's been like the coldest week of the year. We had a couple of calves the last week, and so we had 40 acres. Had some cows growing up. Farmed a little bit. My parents were both teachers and coaches. We grew up on the farm that my mom grew up on, and it was great. I had a pond, ran around outside, had a lot of good friends. Played football, basketball, track, soccer, all the sports, and grew up like I guess kind of like a wholesome middle American family. We'd fight with my brothers, run around, go stay the night at my friend's house. Whenever we did that, waking up, going to church on Sunday, and that was kind of our life. It kind of centered around sports and your family and all those things.
As you were growing up, when did you realize that you might have an opportunity to make a career out of football?
My dad played in the NFL for 10 years. And so when I was young, I was like, oh, this is normal. Like, this is something that, people can do. And he kept telling me, he's like, it's incredibly hard. He's like, just to be able to play football in college is a dream. To be able to do that and have your college paid for. This is pre-NIL, pre any of that. Like, just to have your education paid for, like, that should be a goal. And so I kind of set that out as my goal. And it's interesting. I've asked my dad, as I have 4 kids now, I go, when did you know that I would be able to do that? When did you think that I could? Did you see it when I was 8, when it was 13, 15? And it's like, you're always a good athlete, but a lot of in life, like many things, comes down to how hard you work at things. Is it something that you loved? Were you going to be dedicated? Were you going to be focused at it? And life doesn't come without adversity. And so I had injuries and things growing up, and my first knee scope in 7th grade. And he told me, he's like, you'll never be able to play football in college. Like, you get hurt too much. I broke my wrist a couple times. And then, I ended up becoming a better player. And my first year playing football was in 7th grade. And so I always tell people this. Everybody freaks out about their kids, like not playing sports and not playing this sport in time. I didn't play football until I was 13 years old. I played soccer until then. My dad wouldn't let me play because he was afraid I would get hurt. And I went from being like the worst 7th grade football player, probably relative to like their athletic ability. Like I was a pretty decent athlete, but horrible football player. And I went from that then to 8th grade, being the quarterback, linebacker, like captain, and like just in 1 year, I started lifting weights. I grew a lot, got a lot stronger. And then I went on this kind of run where I was like, okay, I had a picture of Andy Katzenmoyer like in my room, and like, this is how big he is, this is how fast he is, like, how do I get to those things? And the Westerville South guy, so Central Ohio, and like, how do I get to those measurables to be that? And so that was my goal, what I was chasing. And so I went from like 160 to 240 by the time I graduated, gaining like 20, 25 pounds a year through like a lot of hard work, sacrifice, and probably it. And I ended up starting my freshman year in football. We were not good, bad. It's like 2-8, like. We lost to Westerville South 65-13, like opening game. I mean, it was bad. They could have scored 100 on us if they wanted. But I ended up starting like the last 7 games at safety. And then the next year I go to a linebacker. And after my sophomore year, I was like honorable mention All State. And I went to Ohio State's football camp. And I'd went the year before, and no big deal. It's 4 days, and just a normal kid sign up and going to camp. And I did that my sophomore year after that. And they kind of pulled me away, and Coach Puggich was talking to me. He was the D coordinator at the time, and they were moving me around doing some stuff. And then Coach Conley pulled me aside like halfway through it, and they're like, hey, walk me to the middle of the indoor facility and kind of look around. They've got all the bowl stuff and all this stuff. He's like, what's it going to take to make you a Buckeye? And I was like, I don't even know what that means. He's like, we'd like to offer you a full scholarship. Coach Cooper was going to come over. We'll talk to you. And I don't, like, can I think about this? Can I talk to my parents? Like, absolutely. Take all the time you need. We just want to let you know. And I can still kind of envision that moment because it was almost surreal. Now I walk into the Woody Hayes almost daily, go run on the indoor and do all these things. And I remember being, a kid that's barely 16 years old, and looking like, man, like this can't even be real. Like I was hoping to get an offer like Miami, Ohio, where my dad went or something like that. And the fact that Ohio State had offered me, I was like, okay, well, now it's like time to go to work. And I told my dad that, and like he almost didn't believe me. It was pretty remarkable. And so it was kind of a turning point, I guess, in my career at that point. Like, okay, because I had never really thought of myself as a college player, and to get offered by Ohio State at that point was pretty special.
Mm-hmm. So the next chapter, your freshman year, and I believe it was Coach Tressel's second year with the Buckeyes, a very special season, not just because of the result with the national championship, but what it took to get there. And you played in every game that year. So having gone from like you said, you didn't even know if you're a good high school football player to then playing for a national championship team, what was that like for you?
I mean, it was a wild ride. You know, you get there, and first of all, every player coming in thinks like, I'm going to go in here and I commit. They're gonna play me early. You know, like that's going to be the case. And like so often in life, and I was talking to Cody Simon about this, Lathan Ransom, and like everyone views like your life as this linear trajectory, where you start here, and over time, as time increases, like your success increases, and it's like this nice little pretty slope. Like, yep, just getting better. Well, the reality is people see like point A and point B, but it's never a linear track. I mean, there's times where you're above it. There's times where you're way below it. And, my freshman year, it's like, I remember saying, like, I'm playing some. I think outside of like AJ and Maurice, like, well, maybe one other guy played like this third or fourth most plays of any of the freshmen, fifth. Like I'd, get 8 to 10 plays on defense, like in meaningful games and snaps and playing special teams. But like you feel like you're failing every day. Like I can't do this. I told my dad, I'm like, I want to transfer. It's too hard. Like coaches don't like me anymore. And you're going on this run. And I remember him telling me, he's like, you're getting a chance to play in games. Like they're putting you in there. They're never going to put you and AJ in together because you're both freshmen. Like the seniors would have a revolt if you cost them a game. And like just enjoy the ride. This is really special. So just try to get better every day. But like you remember those adverse moments where like you feel like you're behind it and like you feel like you're going in and you're just like running on a treadmill. Nothing is happening. Nothing's working for you. And like, you're not seen by anybody and you're just in there showing up, and this isn't being like the man in high school anymore. So it's a very humbling process. And so you have to kind of take an introspective look of like, okay, how do I get better? What do I need to do? How do I lean in on this? And, I always try to tell like a lot of the guys this, and I told like Lathan and Cody this. It's like, if I would have told you your second or third year, this would have been your final landing spot. Like this would have been the destiny. Like you wouldn't even have believed it. If you would have told me my freshman year I would end up being a first-round draft pick and like had a lot of success and all the things that, like, I would have said, no way. Like I'm not even going to play here at this point. Like I got to figure out how to go somewhere else to play. And that's why like the transfer portal and all the things now, like, there's a benefit to the process and a benefit to the struggle and like finding out about yourself and being patient, learning humility. Like all of those things are attributes that are desirable, but they stink to develop, because to develop them, you've got to go through hard stuff and adverse situations. And I broke my leg my junior year, so I was like talking to Lathan about that, because in my junior year in high school, I ended up breaking my senior year again against Michigan, my other one against Michigan, and like that's when you kind of really find out about yourself. And I remember my dad, I'm like, why did this happen to me? Like I work hard, I do this, and he's like, and he kind of leaned in on that. He's like, God has a plan for everything in your life. Like you don't necessarily know it or realize it at the time, but like there's development that needs to happen with you that you probably are not aware of. And looking back in hindsight, you begin to see those things. But at the time, like you think you're on your track and your plan, and there's really another plan that's there for you that you think you're in control of, but you're really not. And sometimes the brakes are pressed because you're getting ahead of yourself a little bit. And so you get to Ohio State, we win a national championship. I'm like, man, this is the greatest thing ever. And then it's like, well, I want to play more. I want to do more things. And there was still like a process that needed to happen and growth for me. I ended up playing some my sophomore year, but it wasn't before like other stuff had kind of happened and some other adverse situations that I kind of had to go through.
You mentioned God's plan for your life. How does faith play a role in your life back then and even today?
So it's interesting now, and it's awesome that Rock City sponsors this. We started going to Rock City when there was 100 people at the Lennox. It was pretty awesome. I joke with Katie, like when she would stand up there and she was the one like physically counting how many people were in the studio. And my oldest two kids were babies, like in the childcare. And now they're, freshmen and eighth graders in high school and middle school. So it's been a wild ride. Growing up, we grew up in a, very traditional Lutheran church. And my mom's rule was like, dude, we're going to church every Sunday. If you stay at a friend's house and they go to church, you can go to church with them. But if not, I'm coming and your butt's going to be up at like 9 o'clock and you're going to go. Like any middle school boy, it's like, okay, whatever. Like I get it. And as I got older, I began to appreciate that a little more in high school. And you get to college and then it's like, there's a million things being thrown at you and trying to understand like how faith plays a role in your life and, meeting, other guys of faith, like trying to just really feel it out. And like, I wish I was a better person in college. Like I wish I would have leaned into my faith a little more. And I look back and like, it's one of, I wouldn't say regrets, but just an area that I wish I would have focused on. And because usually when things are going well, like, and you can look biblically and all this stuff. And when your things are going well, like very rarely do you ask for help. Like you don't need it. And it's when things go bad. And so my dad always said like, and it's wild because he really didn't go to church a lot with us. Like he's a believer, but he didn't really start going to church until after my brothers and I consistently all kind of left the house. And, went and like officially joined the church and now goes every Sunday with my mom. And like, there's an element there, but he's like, you don't do this all on your own. And he was always very big into that. And so that's why I talk about those break points in life where, whether it's King David, 2,500 years ago or Bobby Carpenter in 2004, like, hey, like check yourself, bud, before you start thinking that you've done nothing wrong in life. Like you need to kind of figure this out and maybe reassess your priorities. And so there was points and times that happened in college. And, I met my girlfriend who became my wife and, she came from a faith-based home and it kind of helped with that a little bit as well. But it probably really wasn't until I started getting into the NFL that, you realize as become more of a mature adult that, okay, like faith needs to play a more active role in my life. Yeah, I'm a believer. Yeah, there's this, there's that, but I need this to be more. And like I said, when things are going well, rarely do you see that. So it's usually one of the low points that you start to reassess. Maybe I need to start leaning into my faith a little more and have that spiritual connection and study the word and do the things and put the work in, really. Like that's what it is. Like any relationship, you got to put the work in. And so like, how do I dedicate some of my discretionary time? Like, well, let's start dedicating some of that, to Christ and trying to seek him more than just saying like, okay, I'm a believer and I'm saved and that's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you were like in college and you spoke about like the adversities you went through, but you didn't feel like you were like, really like following Christ like, would you say you didn't feel like you were really like following him or really leaning on him like in a way that?
Yeah. No, not like these guys today. And I look at them like, man, you guys are so much more mature in your faith and like your understanding of things than I ever was. I prayed fairly routinely, but like I didn't really pick up the word and study it intermittently here and there. In Trust, we'd have quiet time and different things and reflections and, prayer. And it's like, and I understood all that, but it was work. And like you choose how you spend your time. Like show me what you value. Well, show me how you spend your time and your money. And that wasn't something that I really valued at that point. I wish I did. Like looking back, I wish I was a much better person. And that's why I thank those guys all the time. Like I wish I was the role model to kids then the way that you are to my kids. Cause I think that makes a big difference. And we had great guys of faith on our team. And Joel Penn was a teammate of mine and, everything that he's done with life-wise. I see all this and we'd have discussions about faith and things like that, but it just wasn't nearly as in depth. And I wasn't probably lifestyle focused on Christ the way that I should have been.
Was there a point in time in your life where you went from, as you mentioned, like, okay, I'm a believer, I go to church every Sunday because my mom tells me to, but was there a point in time where that transitioned towards you feeling like you're really establishing your own relationship with Jesus?
I wish I could tell you that it was like some moment, aha, and like it's fixed. I mean, I'm a constant project all the time. I mean, I know many of us say that, but I feel a lot of times they asked me a couple of years ago to do a reflection on Ohio State, and I've always kind of shied away from that because it's like I'm so unqualified to do that stuff. It's like, man, I have done some things in my life that I would never want to be made public, and like you think about that. I'm like, yeah, I'm forgiven. Okay, so like let's get past that a little bit and start moving in. And I've had some marital issues with my wife, and it was probably around that time. And I wish this was 15 years ago. It's probably about 7 or 8 years ago, where I started meeting with Todd Myra, who is our executive pastor at Rock City, unbelievable man of faith, and going through a lot of personal stuff. And his thing, it's awesome because he's like a bigger dude, stronger dude. And we would go lift together in the morning, start talking about this. He was, I want you to, as hard as you train your body physically, he's like, you should try to train your soul and your spirit like that in the same manner. And he's like, you're a guy that responds to a challenge pretty well. And he's like, and so him saying that, it's like, okay, I need to lean in on this a little more. And that's why it's like, okay, like I'm a goal-oriented person, and right, wrong, or different. Like he's like, hey, we started out, I was like, what's some stuff that I should read? And he's like, okay, like, let's start reading about King David. He's like, he's a guy that I think most athletes can probably really respond to and resonate with because of everything that had happened in his life. And you look at, how he was exalted, but then not without fallacy as well. And you look at some of like the massive mistakes that he made and ignoring Nathan, like all these different things. And I run like the prophet Nathan. My youngest brother's name's Nathaniel. And from that, and I remember that he gave me advice one time. I ignored it. I was like, geez, it's too much. Like it, and just leaning in and like, hey, let's start studying this. Let's figure out, let's start reading books. Let's start like reading godly books and then read the word as well and try to help grow that. And I'd be lying to you. I said like there weren't ebbs and flows of how committed this time. And then like you get busy in life, and I have 4 kids, the seasons of life. And it's like, okay, like you start drifting away, make some mistakes, things go wrong. It's like, yeah, that's the brake pedal that I always say. You start thinking things are going too good and I'm too busy. Like I don't have time. Hey, wait a second. Like let's come back. Let's come back to the foundation here. And Trust has been a great resource for that because, for me, he's a very faith-based man. And it's like creating some things. And I always ask him what he's reading every year. And because he's one of the wisest guys I know. I mean, if he's my King Solomon, I guess you could say, as far as what he represents. It's like, what are you reading? Like, what are you feeding what are your mind and soul with? And so I get his reading list. And I remember 2 years ago, he was, I read the Sarah Young daily devotional every day. I was like, you know what? That's good. I go, if nothing else, because I work or I'm on radio at 6 a.m. And so a lot of people say like to start the day off with the word. It's like, waking up at 4:30, like trying to read and to do that. It's like some days I was like, you know what? But I can get up and I can read my daily devotional every day before I go in. Like I can do that. Like, and that's something functional, and that'll, hopefully provide the rudder for the rest of my day with it. And so I guess at that point, probably 8 years ago, that was kind of I was baptized in our church at Rock City. That was probably a point where it's like, okay, I mean, I've been far from perfect since that time. Believe me, like, it's not like, hey, wipe the hands, like I'm good. But that was a point where I tried to make more of a conscious effort to be like, I need this to be a part of my life. I need it to be a regular part of my life. And the only way I do that is by, and it was wild. I was studying with my man, Anthony Schlegel, who's awesome, toughest dude in the world. People talk about like faith. You can't be tough and can't be a man of God. I'm like, dude, I mean, Anthony Schlegel is one of the toughest dudes that I've ever been around. And he is a devout man of faith. Like, and we were studying through James and you were reading some of the stuff. And, it's interesting, like different verses hit different people different ways. I never forget like reading James 4:8, probably about 8 years ago. And it's like, in different, obviously, translations of it. But the one that was like, draw near to me, and I'll draw near to you. Like, seek me, and I'll seek you. Like, people want God to act in their life. And it's like, well, go meet him. Go meet him there. And that was something that I had never really done on a consistent basis. And so anytime I'm like, well, I don't really feel like I'm being spoken to, the connectivity, well, like, I'm not going to blame God for that. Like, what am I doing to like help leaning in to make that connection? And so that from that point on, that's been something that I've tried to make a focal point in my life on daily, weekly, routine basis.
When you speak to just like how people look at Christianity and might look at, when you're a tough football player who you've got the whole world, I don't know, like there's definitely a bit of I'd say misconception around, faith-based, weak guys, guys who, can a football player be that? Does that kind of speak into like how impressed you are with like the current guys on the Ohio State football team and like being so outward about it and like the example that they set?
It's unbelievable that like, and some people, they get upset, the mentioning of it every time. Like, but when you hear Will Howard and Trey and Mac, G, all these guys, and I mean, there's all of them, just about every one of them do it. Where the first thing on the mic is like, I'd like to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and people are like, why do they do that? I'm like, because that sets the tempo for everything else they're going to say, and giving credit, like always give your first and your best, and like, okay, well that is that, and so you see that, and you watch these guys go out there, and I'm like, when they lost to Michigan, and this like, well, they're praying, and they're not all seeing Carmel. How guys have prayed together. I see it in the NFL. We did it when I was in the NFL. Did it in college. Like that's always been a thing. It was just never really talked about before. And now when you lose a game like that, people want to try to find a way to like blame something. Like, well, it's because they're soft, because these guys are men of faith. And I'm like being a man of faith does not make you soft at all. Like, if anything, I think it can toughen you and harden you more than anything else. And watching those guys come through this and to see how they've had that success now and go through those times, like, and it's interesting because I think people have kind of leaned in on it. Because after that Michigan game, and you talk about toughness, like toughness sometimes is staying the course, like my good and faithful servant, like staying together, like responding to the people that are around you, being a great teammate, being a great father, being a great husband, like leaning into stuff that you are doing that doesn't seem like it's getting you anywhere, but it's the stuff that the Lord commands you to do. And that can be sometimes a galvanizing force and a galvanizing factor. And that's what I think you saw after that game. And people have finally started talking about it, because if you're not somebody of high character and belief in those things, and belief in the people around you, and the belief in the commonality of purpose, then that's when sometimes like you'll get splintered. And instead of turning into a diamond, you will fracture. And it was awesome to see that with those, I call them the young men, because they stuck with it and they leaned into each other. And instead of looking to like place blame on others, which is essentially exalting yourself, instead of accepting your responsibility and how can I be a part of this and be a part of the solution, you try to separate yourself from it. They all leaned in together and said, let's solve this problem together. Like, we all value each other, we love each other, and let's lean in and get it done.
You talked about, you heard some questions of why would these athletes say, first and foremost, all glory to God, and sometimes repeatedly, and how there was maybe some confusion around that. The purpose of the Walk Foundation and the Buckeye Revival podcast is really just to give those players a voice to share their story and share what has happened in their life. And we're so thankful that the guys took the time during the season, their busy schedule, to come here and share those stories. I think you have a unique perspective, just with your involvement and being at the Woody so often. And I know there's just probably thousands of stories that you could share, but if you had to pick one or a few, when you look at this team and the time that you spent with them, from a faith standpoint, like, who are these players to you? What do you see in them on a personal level?
I mean, they're some of the greatest young men that I know. And I mean, I'm 20 years older than these guys. And, I heard Jack's stories, Bob's like a brother, like maybe more like an uncle, like something like that. But, connected through, Ohio State, but also, connected through Christ and that connection that you have there. And it's awesome. Like I get a chance to be around him, like, I'll just overhear conversations and to listen to Trey talk about, he was telling some of the young guys, and this is how culture is built on a team. And we had guys would come back and talk to me and, AJ, like, it's Mike Vrabel and, Andy Katzenmoor and Joey Galloway, and guys would come back through, and you have the connectivity through Ohio State. And so like I've always tried to kind of lean back in and help those guys and be a mentor and an ear and maybe advice if they ever need it. But like I was listening to Trey tell this story and, and how he obviously thanks God and, and now he does all the signing when he scores and everything. And my son takes ASL, and so he like knew it all. I was like, why do I have to jump? And I'm like finding it on Instagram. My son's like, oh yeah, I could have told you that. Like, and he thought that was super cool. And but Trey's like, when I scored, I always used to point my hand at the sky. He goes, but I used to do it like because I thought that was like a cool thing to do. Like, and there's like ulterior motives to it. He goes, it really wasn't this. And he goes, it's like whether it's for women or for fame or whatever, like all these extrinsic things. And he's like, man, I was so misplaced. Like, listen to him tell some of the young guys this. I'm like, gosh, like, that's why I hear that. And I'm like, I wish that I would have like had that perspective at that age. And for him to have like a metamorphosis like that is amazing. And to watch these guys that compete hard in practice. And, there's time like G. Scott is one of the other, guys who's obviously been very big in this faith movement. And, there was like a fight and a skirmish during practice and like listening to Lathan Rance and they like tease each other about it because they're all Christian dudes. And he's like, turn the other cheek. Like, and like you can see G like in the moment, it's like, yeah, that's right. And Lathan's kind of like giving it to him a little bit, but like I was laughing at it because I was like, this is what a brotherhood is. Like, this is how it operates. And so to be that close to him and to see that, and it's just, they're easy to root for because they're great young men. And like their success, I want it more than anything just because they've sacrificed, they've done all those things. And there's no guarantee of it. Like, God doesn't guarantee you because you're a believer, your life's going to be easy. In fact, it's going to be harder. And like, you see some of the criticism that they got because of that throughout the season. Like, there were issues that came with it. But ultimately, like, if you're faithful, you'll be rewarded. Now, what that looks like, I mean, no one knows at the time. There's ultimately a bigger plan, but with that relationship with those guys, like they've helped me become a better man of faith because I look at them and I think this is what I want to be like. I want to lean in as much as they do on a consistent basis. And I wish like there's an envy's not, supposed to covet and be enviable, but I'm like, if I could be enviable about wishing that I was more like them when I was their age and trying to figure out now, challenging me, like, well, how do I get to, if these guys can be at the height of their fame and have all of this perspective and faith, how can I have that as well?
Mm-hmm. Can you provide people a better perspective on when you're Ohio State and you lose to Oregon, you lose to Michigan, and then for that team to bounce back and then to make that run in the playoffs? Can you speak about like a player's perspective on that?
So when you lose to Michigan, we lost in 2003, and like it's something that just weighs on you. When you feel like you had a chance to be great and win a national title, and you've worked so hard at it, and you've sacrificed all this time and like the physical pain and torture and everything else that's gone through it, like plays here or there, like it eats at you. It really eats at you, and like it's hard to get up and everybody and talk radio, media, all this stuff. It's these guys are talented, but they're not tough. They can't get it done. Like they don't have, the winner's edge and all these things. And like knowing inherently, like sometimes you just lose, and you can do everything right and still in the preparation and still lose a game. Like that's how it works. But like getting up and hearing that, and it's part of the thing. Like I've always believed this, and it was one of the things that I think it was in the winner's manual with Tress, and trying to believe like the darkest hours just before the dawn. Like you don't know when the sun's coming up. You don't know when it's going to turn for you. But if you're faithful, if you are faithful to the process, faithful to the Lord, faithful to your teammates, like all those things, it will turn. It will turn. You don't know when, and there may be more bad still, but that seemed like it was about as bad as it was going to get. Like you had an opportunity there. And so like you get up, you go in, and like, it's literally like climbing out of a hole over 3 or 4 days to then get back. Okay, I'm working. Okay, we can do this. We have an opportunity. And they did. In the past, maybe you don't have that opportunity. And so you have to eat that for a whole year. And it's tough. It is a gross sandwich to eat on a daily basis. And those guys did it as well as anybody because it's something that like it weighs on you for a long time.
You mentioned, the impact that the players have had on your kids, and I think you have a unique perspective there as a father. How do you feel that these Christian athletes have made an impact on like your kids and also, just young people in the Columbus area in Ohio?
The Columbus area, I mean, the country. Like when you're given a national stage like that, and you choose to proclaim Christ, like, and everybody does. It's not like it's just one guy. And so that's where you see this. And listening to Scott Van Pelt, I believe, or maybe it was Reese Day, one of the guys after the
they
game
were together, and they both spoke to it.
And they both spoke, and like, you can say what you want about this, but there's a real faith element on this team that I don't know if it fully existed before. And so you can try to ignore, you can try to downplay it, and you can have your opinion on its impact, but he's like, it's real. The impact of it is real. And it's awesome to see that now, and like to watch my kids go see like that. And my dad jokes, he's like, man, it's like watching their games after the press conference, like going to church. He's like, as much as they proclaim and as much as, the scripture they quote and all these things, and Trey talking about, after, like, to hear, because people are fallible. Like, you're just still going to make mistakes. Being a Christian doesn't immune you from poor decisions in moments, but it's how you handle that. Like, and Trey gets the personal foul against Texas, and it's like, my goodness, that's so out of character for him. And then to hear him, obviously has the long screen touchdown. It's like, okay, that's redemption. It's great. And to hear how he handled that process, like, I went to the sideline, apologized to my teammates, apologized to the Lord, like, I shouldn't have acted like that, acting out of anger. Would you forgive me for what I did? And you're like, man, like, in the middle of a game, to have that type of perspective and understanding, like, I let down my teammates, I let down my Lord, like, I should not have acted like that. I need forgiveness for that. And to have all of that in that time, and then to go out there, clear your mind, and to be able to have, like, something positive happen. Is that why it happened? I don't know. I can't sit there and tell you, was that all part of the plan and this and that? But like, for my kids to see that, it's like, these guys are faith first guys. And so for my kids to see it, I know their friends see it. They talk about it. They ask about the different Bible verses and different things that they have written on there. Like, they're just conversation starters and get people curious about faith. And as a society, we had become so secular that to see this swing back, and like, things I took for granted, my kids go to church, and, we talk about stuff, and, we try to study the word, and I always have them read the beginner's Bible. That's what we learn to read on and everything. So I'm like, if nothing else, we're going to get this early on so we can at least have some understanding of, the word of God and the messages and the stories that have been told. But then to see that, and like, they talk about it, and like, oh yeah, I remember that, and like leaning in to see their friends do that. It's really cool. And it's a far greater reach than like any parent can have because of the role models that those guys are. And so I constantly try to thank them for that, because as a dad trying to raise like young Christian men and a daughter in this era, like, it's not easy to do, because there's a lot of pulls in opposite directions about how we should believe and what we should think.
Yeah, and like, the thing that kind of was telling me there was, rather than football being a distraction from the Lord, the Ohio State football team actually ended up being a gateway to the Lord for people who were listening and watching them throughout the year. But I was even thinking about when Ryan Day said that now the story can be told. What do you think the story is?
It's tough, because every great story needs a great ending, or else it's not really told. Like, I watched Jack Sawyer make one of the greatest plays ever against Michigan. And it kind of is just like dust to the annals of history, because you don't win the game. So like, no one talks about it being an unbelievable interception on the goal line that could have won the game, but ultimately the game wasn't won. And so then when you are able to finish this the right way, the play, the scoop and score on Quinn Ewers, like that means a lot. Like Trey's touchdown in that game, that means a lot. Jeremiah Smith's touchdown against Notre Dame, or catch against Notre Dame, like how they played and responded against Tennessee, what they're able to do against Oregon, out there in the Rose Bowl, like those things are all magnified because you were able to put the correct final chapter on it. And so when you finish it the right way, there's a reason to read the rest of it. The story isn't incomplete. The story has been finished. And I think that you were able to close the loop. And I think that's what Ryan was hoping, because this is such a great group of young men that now you can lean into that and the story of the faith element and their commitment and dedication, to each other, to their coach, the relationships, like, the tough love that Ryan talked about that people said is soft. Like, tough love is telling people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. Like, and that's the hardest thing in the world to do, and to be hold people accountable for their actions to each other, to themselves, like all those things. And so now all that gets told, and it's going to get told in a way that people are going to want to relive it because of nostalgia and wanting to relive that moment. And every time you go back to relive it, you'll become inspired again. And then you'll be able to tell this whole story that involves, the players, the ups, the downs, their faith, all of these things, that came together, this confluence to tell an unbelievable story of a 4-game run that, a lot of teams may have folded. They chose to lean into each other and ultimately were rewarded with the greatest prize.
There were on this team, part of the story is sacrifice, and both players and coaches, very talented, that were in positions of sacrificing to reach their ultimate goal as a team. Is there a story of sacrifice that stands out to you?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things, and it's overshadowed now because it just seems so commonplace for this team. But if you're Travion Henderson and you're coming back and you decide to come back, and they're like, hey, by the way, we're going to add another guy who is the SEC leading rusher. Like, how do you feel about that? And this is where the faith element is remarkable in this. And I don't think the story can be told without faith, because pride will get in the way of, and I don't know if I was that age, if I would have been able to put my foolish pride aside personally, because that's more of a spiritual thing. Like, it has to be driven out of you. Because, like, I'm really good. I should be the guy. Like, I want to help this team. And some of it's not misplaced. It's like, I think I'm the best person to be able to help them. And talk to your coach, like, if this is the best way to go about this, if you think this is the way, then I'm all in. And, I need to put the team before me. Like, the selflessness, I mean, that's inherently a Christian attribute, the selflessness of that. And the Trey and Quinshawn paradox. And Emeka Egbuka is the all-time leading yardage leader at Ohio State in reception for a receiver. And he's never really once been the focal point of the passing offense. You had Marvin Harrison before, you had Jackson before him, you've got Jeremiah Smith now. And Emeka goes out there and humbly serves his team each and every week without any worry about praise or satisfaction. When you have your leaders that do that, I mean, it sets the table, because everyone else looks like, well, who am I to complain? Who am I to think that I should be getting more praise? And, by the way, the praise of man is fleeting with that. And so, like, don't worry about that. But it's easy to say, it's a lot harder to do. And those guys executed it on a way that I've never seen before. And frankly, at 21, 22, I don't know if I would have been in that place where you're going to bring in another great player. Yeah, it's going to help the team, but it may diminish your role. But what's amazing about it is it helped both of those guys. Like, it helped everybody. And usually when you're willing to do that and sacrifice of yourself, like, great things can grow from it. But it's a leap of faith that you've got to trust that, the people you're bringing in are the right people, that the plan is correct. Like, the coaches, like, they're all in it and everybody's working together and rowing in the same direction. And but you got to take that leap. You've got to take that leap of faith and understand that, like, this can ultimately benefit us. And the only way I think you can probably do that is understanding, like, biblically, like, fame is not the goal. And so I can put that aside if it helps glorify, my team and glorify the Lord. It's not about my glory at all.
Mm-hmm. How do you think those character traits will translate for those guys and, like, going to the next level?
Everybody wants great teammates. And great teammates are humble. They work hard. They're willing to sacrifice. They're not selfish individuals. And I play with some guys who are great players, very selfish. Like, you really don't inherently like them as teammates. And to have guys like that are literally team first guys, putting a price tag on those guys, when you combine them with the talent level, because usually those things are mutually exclusive. It's easy to be selfless if you don't feel like you have a lot to offer. When you have a lot to offer, you usually are very selfish about wanting to be able to offer everything you have. Instead of just saying, here it is, you tell me when it's needed, and I'll be patiently waiting. That's really hard when you work so hard and you know how talented you are to put that in someone else's hands and say, just when you're ready, I'll be ready. And, it's inherently a Christian belief and tenet, like an attribute. And so it's an awesome thing. And that's when people are talking about, a lot of the faith issue stuff. I'm like, some of the best guys I ever played with in the NFL were huge faith guys that have great Bible studies and all these things. I go, it only amplifies the best parts of you as a human.
So there could be 17, 18 players from this team that are selected in the NFL draft in April. One thing I think many people don't think about is just how tired these guys are. And I think you can relate to that with your experience. But what would your advice be to all of these guys that are transitioning to the next level? They're going to start writing a new chapter. Like during this time period of they've just accomplished so much, but at the same time, probably very physically and mentally tired. What would your advice be as they're transitioning to the next level?
So as we're recording this, it's the Saturday after the game. So hopefully you enjoy it for a week. You need to rest, you relax. You can do some light activity. I would recommend, I always like to work out and do something. So light impacts, low impact stuff, nothing crazy. Working out for me has always been a therapeutic thing. It's like it's where I can be alone with my thoughts. I don't have to worry about anything else. And it's always been a great point of reflection. So I like to just do something, but try to step back. And then the reality is like, it's not fair, but you just finished up an unbelievable season, but you're really 3 weeks behind everybody else, your peers, and trying to prepare now to train for the NFL draft. And so you got to take this week, decompress, enjoy it with your teammates, celebrate it with them, into the fullest. And then literally Sunday at noon in the horseshoe, like you are going to close that book, and the final chapter has then been written on it. And now it's on to writing the next one. And so they've got to find a way to refocus, set goals, make sure you're trying to get healthy and, body, mind, and spirit. But you have to move forward. And that's compartmentalizing these things. Like that's what athletes do. And being able to say, hey, I just achieved something great. Now let's go try to achieve something greater, and trying to do that again. Except for this time, it's a little different because you're working as an individual as opposed to part of a team. And that's what's tough. These guys had such a great connectivity, and they pushed each other so well that I'm sure they'll text, I'm sure they'll talk, but a lot of them are going to be going in different directions. And so to do that by yourself now is a much harder thing. I mean, fellowship is a good thing. And so it's maybe the best of things. And so to do that by yourself is going to be hard for these guys.
Mm-hmm. When we look at this championship team, the microphone and the camera a lot of times is on Will, Jeremiah, Travion, and Mecca, and rightfully so. But can you speak to some of the other guys, like the Donovan Jacksons of the team, the Cody Simons, and just how much they improved and really played at an extraordinary high level, but they might not be talked about very often?
Donovan Jackson is probably one of the most vital parts of this team. I mean, he was a guy that could have came out last year, decides to come back, playing at guard, really good. You're going to be a highly drafted guard. We need you to play tackle for the team. Like another sacrificial move. Is it his best thing for his career? Maybe. We don't know. Maybe he doesn't play well out there and then it looks bad. But, in his selflessness, he probably helped himself immensely because he did a great job at playing left tackle. Now, maybe he's not going to play left tackle in the NFL, but people look at that and say, okay, we didn't realize that he could do that. Maybe he can play right tackle for us. So now he's got all this position value. He's got great film of doing it. And his selfless move and selfless act for the help of the team, instead of saying, no, this is where I'm playing, this is what I want to do, this is going to be best for me. No, I'm going to move out and I'm going to help the team. And then in doing that, like it opens up a role, for Austin Saraville, and then ultimately Luke Montgomery, who is a guy who's been patient, and he's been on here and waited. And like, I like talking to the guys when they're not playing. Like, I know you think you should be playing, and maybe you should. I'm not here to tell you shouldn't, but just keep working and keep getting better. Like, you'll get called upon. Like, you don't know when it's going to happen. You never know. And he probably would have never thought, like, as this year's going on, like, oh, this is happening. I'm not playing. And it's like, it's easy to get frustrated. And then all of a sudden, like, you're playing in a national championship game and starting and playing like significant minutes and being a vital role of that. Like if you would have asked him probably after that first Oregon game if that was going to happen, nah, like that ain't it. Like I'm never going to get a play this year. And like that's how you have no idea how the plan is going to play out. And so you have to kind of just stick with it and continue to move. And Cody Simon, who sat for really 4 years, he started last year and rotated with Tommy and Steele. But like just the conversations that I'd had with him, like, bud, you're a good player. You're going to be fine. You've got to stick with it. And you're going to be a leader. And I didn't know he'd end up being the captain and the walkover recipient and being the national championship defensive MVP and all those things. But like it's a function of just keep showing up, man. And people see that. And that's how you're going to gain the respect of your teammates. Like society doesn't watch what's done behind the scene. Like they only get to see the great stuff, the celebrations and all of the plays that are made. They never watched Cody Simon show up every day for practice, work his butt off, learn, constantly improve, wait, like lean into Tommy and Steele and their experience of watching them and how to do it. And so that when his time was here, he was ready. And it's a great learning note of that. You know, like Lathan Ransom, Caleb Downs, they brought him in. He got, all the glory. Everyone's looking at him like this guy's the answer. I mean, Lathan Ransom was incredibly vital and valuable to this team. He's a second-team All-American. And maybe he should have been first, but you're not putting both those guys there together. But he's a guy that injured every year. And like during those points, like it's easy to ask God and it's easy to look like, why me? Why is this happening to me? I'm never going to get my break. Start playing well, get hurt. Start playing well, get hurt. And I can never finish a year. And then the 1 year he finishes, he does a tremendous job. And he had some injury scares this year, but to then finish and to do what he did, like you don't see that out of young people because we live in such an instant gratification society. Like delayed gratification is hard. It's hard and it has to be trained. It has to be learned. And like for those guys to all be a part of that, the guys like you didn't see the fact that, Ty Hamilton, like no one's really talking about him. Like you talk about Jack and JT and rightfully so and Tyleek, but like Ty Hamilton did a great job inside and he's not a guy that seeks the spotlight and he's such a huge part of everything that happened out there. Same thing with Jordan Hancock. Like nobody addresses like his role was invaluable and it's really hard to find. And he wasn't the star safety and star corner and all these other positions, but he was tremendous at what he was asked to do. Carnell Tate, like the third receiver, didn't have a ton of catches. He had some big ones. He'd like to probably get 10 targets a game too. But he believes in his team. He believes in his coach. And you don't ever see him after the game like, yeah, we won, but I mean, I should be getting looked at more. No. Like those guys, they're remarkable humans. And I think that it's tough to be that good of a person if you're not rooted in faith. I'm just telling you, like, I don't know many people that you say, well, I don't believe in God, but they're really a heck of a person. Like, they're out there, but they're few and far between because the tenets of faith, like the sacrifice and the humility, that's what allowed those guys to be able to have that type of success.
Mm-hmm. We'll speak your language for a minute. Looking ahead to next year, how do you look at the linebacker room as far as Sonny announced he's coming back, Arvell will be back. So what do you see in those guys?
Yeah, it's interesting with Sonny. People are like, will he leave? And I'm like, I don't think that he will. Like he could get drafted pretty high, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done with Sonny. Just played linebacker for a year. Like he realizes that. Like you have to be honest with yourself about things. And so now it's going to be his turn. Like you're going to be the guy who's leading that defense. And Arvell and Peyton Pierce, they got young guys coming in, but there's some talented guys there. And so it's going to be a battle of how they get them on there. And James does a great job coaching that group. But they're the backbone. Like it's really hard to have a great defense without great linebacker play. And they had it this year. People were on Sonny. Why wasn't he better earlier? And he wasn't, as good as we should have thought. Like it's his first year doing it. He got much better from week 1 to game 16. And that's how usually when you work at things in life, you're going to improve along the way. And so now he's got another offseason to continue to put some tools in his toolbox and hone his skills. But it's an exciting room because I think Sonny learned so much from Cody this year. And now it's going to be up to him. And I tell Cody, like, the seniors, like legacy, people confuse it. Like trophies and banners and all those things, that's part of it. That's the physical part. But really your legacy is when you're a leader, it's what your position group looks like, what your room looks like when you're extracted. Have you been able to train the next level of guys below you so that they're able to carry on the same tasks in the manner in which you were trained. And so that's what I challenged Lathan with. That's what I was challenging Emeka with. Like when G. Scott, when you guys leave here, Trey, like, will these guys have all the things that they need from a selflessness perspective, hopefully from a faith perspective, from all of these elements that you brought? Don't just be the person that brings the water, be the person that shares it, and like make sure that they know how to use it and they know how to do it the same way.
How do you follow up a national championship win?
You know, they asked Tom Brady, which is your favorite Super Bowl? And his answer was always the next one. And I mean, that's it. I mean, Ohio State, the stakes are high. There's never a year like, if we go 8-4, I think we'll be pretty good. Or maybe just 10-2. If we just make the playoff, like we'll be satisfied with that. It doesn't matter if they're losing everybody. It's like they have good young players behind them. You know, you're losing that whole D line. You've got some really talented pieces, and Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson. Caden McDonald played really well. There's some really good young players. I'm leaving a bunch out. Like those guys got to step up. Just as I mentioned on the defense, linebacker, safety. They found some guys on the interior of the offensive line that played really well. You got to get some tackles. Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith. Like they got to continue to improve. Brandon Ennis. Like you're gonna have a quarterback battle. James Peoples. Like he's a great player, and he didn't get to play it all this year because he had two other talented running backs. It's gonna be up to him now. Like, you've got to shoulder that load. Are you ready to handle it? And so there's going to be those expectations. They're always there. And it's foolish to run from them. You have to embrace them. It's like hugging a cactus. Like you got to lean into it. You can't run from it because then it's not doing any good. Understand why you came here and what the expectations are with it.
I guess last question here for you, Bobby. For anybody who may be really inspired from this team to even like pursue a relationship with Christ, what encouragement would you give somebody?
It can be one of the greatest decisions you ever make. And I would encourage people find other people of faith with you, find a church, go there, like get fed. It's really tough to continue to grow your faith if you're not feeding it. And you have to do that with, I'm a better person by hanging around those guys. Like being around other people, other men of faith, like, those guys, they don't swear. They're good humans. There's times when I'm around people and like my language gets rough because I'm hearing rough language and it just permeates your thought. It's hard. It's hard to separate that. But being around those guys, like it makes it better. And so like try to surround yourself with those type of people. And if you're able to do that, that'll help. Find a church, study the word, and when you're young in faith, like try to find a digestible Bible that you can read and like begin to understand and study. And maybe it's a daily devotional, because break it down a little bit better and it'll be easier to kind of ingest. And I like a daily devotional because it gives you something every day to eat, like regardless of what's happened. If you can start the day with it, it's tremendous. And you talk about Ryan's faith a little bit, and I know we're getting long on this, but they won the national championship, and people have kind of seen this on January 20th, 2025. 37 years before that, Ryan lost his father on that same day. And, there are coincidences in this world, and I think there's things that happen, with a heavier hand. And I usually text guys, some stuff and some different things at times. And in my daily devotional, I woke up that day and I remember reading it that morning. I ended up sending this over to Lathan because someone on our podcast asked him, like, hey, it's a great question that came in. What are you studying right now in the Bible? He's like, I'm actually studying Jeremiah. And he's like, it's, Caleb Downs. He's like, that's what he's working on. Him and his brother are both named, Caleb and, Josh, his brother, and they're prominent there. He's like, we're studying that together. And I told him, I go, the two passages that were pulled from Jesus Calling from Sarah Young for my devotional on January 20th. As I'm reading this, I can tell that the one is going to be referenced in there. But it was Isaiah 55, 9 through 11, and then Jeremiah 29, 11, which is, I know the plans I have for you, and they're not to harm you, but to prosper you. And I'm seeing that, and I'm like, for that to come down on that day with like all of the adversity, all the things that these guys had experienced, I was like, I'm not going to say anything to him yet. I'm going to send it to Lathan a little bit later, but just understanding like, man, that it was very powerful. Not that guarantees a win or whatever, but I'm like, there's a lot of things to this story, and there's a lot of opportunities for guys to go stray, and understanding that the plan is always to be good. And when that turns out, you never know. But it was something pretty powerful that I saw, and so find something like that, lean into that, and Tress got me onto it. And I'm very grateful now that it's been a part of my life now for the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bobby, thanks so much for joining us today. And we actually named the Walk podcast. The reason it's called the Walk is for athletes to be able to share their journey, no matter where they're at in their walk. And you're actually our first former athlete that we've had on the show, and I'm so glad that we invited you, because it's been just great hearing your perspective, your stories, and hearing about your faith as well. So thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, guys. It's been an absolute honor, and keep doing great things. It's been fun to continue to watch those guys share their stories with you and share their faith, and keep doing it, providing outlets for positive influence for our young people.